Welcome all to Unity Church-Unitarian. Whether you are watching us live or online, whether you are here in the sanctuary or at home, we welcome you to this hour. Your gifts and your wounds are welcome here. It is said that the church is here to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. I say we are all afflicted and we are all comfortable. May our time together this morning be a comfort and a confrontation. May we here find peace in times of tumult. May we here invite tumult into times of peace. May we here find calm in times of restlessness. May we here allow restlessness to evolve into action. Let this be the place you consider what you've never considered. Let this be the place you imagine for yourself something new and unthinkable. May this hour bring dreams of new ways of being in the world. We kindle this flame for the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. May these three guests attend well to this hour. Come, let us worship together.
Please join together in our responsive affirmation. You may rise.
I didn't get over here quick enough.
All together at first. Working within ourselves, among our church community, and beyond the larger world, we, the people of Unity Church-Unitarian, create a multicultural spiritual home built on authentic relationships.
Ground ourselves in personal practice and communal worship that grows our capacity for wonder and spiritual deepening.
Articulate our Unitarian Universalist faith identity, teach it to our children, share it with others, and live it courageously in the world.
Know each other in all our fullness and create an ever-widening circle of belonging for all people.
Generously give and openly receive compassionate care in times of joy, sorrow, and transition.
Discover and pursue our individual and collective work to advance justice, wholeness, and equity for people, our earth, and all life on it.
Create brave space for racial healing and dismantling dominant culture.
Sustain and steward the Church and our larger Unitarian Universalist movement for the future.
Unity Church-Unitarian fosters transformation through a free and inclusive religious community that encourages lives of integrity, service, and joy. Those were Unity Church's end statements, and particularly generously give and openly receive compassionate care in times of joy, sorrow, and transition. This is one of those times of joy, because today we are celebrating new lives in a special ceremony where we will say aloud the names of these children, we will bless them, and we will promise them to be a church that will love and care for them as they grow. And in our services, we believe that every child is an original blessing. And so we will bless these children and by using the elements of earth, air, fire, and water. And we're going to need to create a little space for the family to come through right here. And so at this time, I'd like to invite the Boehm family to come forward and invite Reverend Karen Gustafson, our Minister of Congregational Care, to come forward to help in this ritual that we call Celebration of New Lives or Child Dedication. Good morning. Good morning and welcome. So we begin this ceremony. We're dedicating 2 children today. We're sorry that unfortunately Luke James Avery will not be able to be with us, but we will dedicate him at another time. But we begin this service with the gift of water. And this is because we are born of and in and of water. And this is water that has been collected from our water ingathering ceremony in September. It's been boiled and purified. And it, yes, that's important, because it comes from all over. It comes from this community. So this water is from this community. So I'm going to bless our 2 children, Aurelia and Ellison, with the gift of water. Bless you with this water. May you always feel refreshed and sustained. And Ellison, I'm going to bless you with this water. May you always feel refreshed and sustained. Next, we bless our children with the gift of earth. We do this because we hope that you will always feel connected to the land and to feel the wonder of the world around you. It's like, what is that? I'm just going to put a little bit of dirt on your hand. We bless you so that you may always feel connected to the land and feel the wonder of the world around you. And next, we bless you with the gift of fire. This fire symbolizes the light of truth. And so we bless you with the light of truth. May this light of truth guide you, and the warmth of love always surround you. May the light of truth guide you, and may the warmth of love always surround you. And then we bless you with the gift of air. The gift of air, may your breath and voice bring truth and justice to the world. And then finally, we bless you with the gift of beauty. And we ask and pray that your life unfold with all the grace and the loveliness of this flower. We bless you with the gift of beauty. May your life unfold with all the grace and loveliness of this flower. So each of you has a name, and by that name you shall be called. So what name have you chosen for this child? Aurelia. We name you as your parents have named you, one more Redeemer. And what name have you given this child? Ellison. We name you as your parents have named you, one more Redeemer. So I'm going to invite the congregation to rise as willing and able now, and join with me in the liturgy found in your order of service. Are you ready to dedicate yourselves to Aurelia and Ellison Boehm? Will you strive to love and cherish them in times of struggle as well as gladness? We acknowledge the divine spark within each child. Thank you. You may be seated. And welcome, and we celebrate you and are so grateful for your presence here. Blessings.
Each time we gather for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Together, we recognize the cycles of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is the center of this and every sacred community. We pray for our neighbors in prison, those who care for members of families in ill health, those who are struggling to stay afloat in the midst of poverty. Our lives are blessed by those who knowingly and with curiosity face their final days. We pray for those in harm's way, for the wisdom and the strength of the leaders of our country, and for the people of this courageous congregation as we live together into our longing to embody and to help build the beloved community. Although no names were submitted for today's embracing meditation, I am aware of so many changes and challenges in our members' lives. Some have slipped and fallen on ice and are in various stages of healing and mending. Others are grieving the loss of a loved one. Some are missing our children who are at college or at work. Some are facing fears both great and small. For all of this and more, we hold in heart and mind. So please join me now in a moment of prayer. We gather here today in the spaciousness of mystery and grace. We bring together our whole and broken selves to offer to one another and to this beloved community what measure of holy love and service we can. Eternal Spirit that holds us in this season of promising uncertainty, we feel the hints of warmer air and see the water running in the streets that mix unbidden with squalls of snow and frozen rain that challenges our footing and our patience. We long for signs of warmth and new life. In this season, we are called to seek wisdom and to practice patience, to know and to honor uncertainty as our constant companion. May we hold in mindful care our LGBTQ+ families whose uncertainty has been multiplied by the brutal beating March 1st of a transgender woman at the Lake Street light rail station in Minneapolis. The people of the Ukraine whose lives are ravished by war. The people of Turkey whose lives have been changed forever by the power of a natural disaster and the inadequacy of human response. And the people of Israel and Palestine caught in the centuries-old struggle to hold the certainty of place. And all of the victims of those whose responses to uncertainty is violence. On this day, may we hold to what certainty we can, that there is a deep and sustaining love and goodness within, between, among, and beyond us, that we who are here know that we matter in ways we cannot know, even as we join and leave this place. That change is the only constant, and that celebration and grief are both ways through. Here, gathered, held in the spaciousness of mystery and grace, may we know the peace that passes understanding and the power of the ministry that we share. So may it be. Amen.
Before I begin, I just have to thank the Unity Singers and the composer of this piece. Thank you for this gorgeous, gorgeous art. Appreciate it. Where did we come from? What are we? Where are we going? These are the questions we sang this morning, and these are the essential questions that are woven in and among and throughout our lives. Where did we come from? What formed our bones, our personalities, our values? What are we? Are we human beings having a spiritual experience, or spiritual beings having a human experience? And where are we going? On the one hand, we all know our final destinations, but there are so many paths we can take, so many highways and byways, so many detours, dangers, toils, and snares along the way. Discovering, discussing, articulating, responding, and in some cases, answering these questions is the purpose of religious community. And it's likely one of the reasons why you're here today. So whether this is the first time you stepped into this church or the several hundredth time, these are the questions which peal through our lives as surely as the Klingle bell calls us to gather each week. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Well, these are the questions I've been asking as your interim senior minister. And today's sermon will respond to these questions from my vantage point as both an outsider to the church system and intimately involved in the inner workings of the church for a near daily basis for the past 6 months. So I want to acknowledge something right up front, that what you're about to hear is one story out of the many stories I've heard. It's the story that I am creating as I listen deeply and attentively to the stories that you are telling. And it's my job to interpret those stories, to seek a deeper understanding of what they might mean. Now, I don't anticipate that we will come away from this sermon, or even this interim time, with a single narrative about Unity's history and identity. But what I do expect is to broaden and complexify the nuances of those stories. So my hope is to go beyond a good-bad binary and to embrace the whole of Unity Church with both heart and mind as we move forward. So as a professional interim minister, I come to every church with 5 lenses, and you've heard me talk about them before. Before this interim ministry is over, I expect you to recite them back to me. But I explore your history. I examine and explore your identity. I assess your leadership needs, your relationship to the denomination, and to help prepare you for your next settled ministry. And I began this process last October when I hosted a Wellspring Wednesday conversation about the interim ministry time. And in that gathering, I asked those attending to write down 3 things they hoped the interim would address. And I looked for the suggestions that appeared more than once. Now, let me just say, all of the suggestions were worthy of deeper consideration. But I looked at the ones that came up most frequently, and there were 2. They were a review of your liturgy, of the way you do church. In fact, 2 people wondered the same thing, if worship could be less formal and more joy-filled. And the second one was by far the most comments and could be summarized in this way: address the rift revealed at the congregational meeting in May and develop a process for truth-telling and reconciliation. Now, for those of you who may be brand new to Unity or not familiar with its most recent history, let me bring you up to speed. Between 2021 and spring 2022, Unity Church launched a search for its new settled minister position following the retirement of a 21-year co-ministry with the Reverends Rob and Jan Eller-Isaacs. And in our system, which is called congregational polity, it is the congregation who votes on the settled ministry position, unlike my position, which is a hire by the board. A search team is nominated and affirmed, and then they embark upon the process of preparing for, interviewing, and selecting a candidate to present to the congregation for a vote. Our current bylaws require a 75% affirmative vote, but most candidates for the job will not accept a vote less than 90%. Our congregational vote for the candidate presented last spring came in at less than 75%, well below the threshold for the congregation or the candidate to accept the call to this senior position. The congregational meeting was 3 hours long and involved members speaking about why they were or were not planning to vote for the candidate. And although some experienced these comments as members simply speaking their own truth, others experienced the comments made at the congregational meeting as hurtful and divisive. And members who are or were friends, and even a few spouses, found themselves on either side of the vote. By the time I arrived in August, feelings of shock, disappointment, pain, betrayal were all there. And for some, this was a crisis of faith. Some left the congregation wondering how this could happen to an otherwise wonderful, loving, kind, compassionate congregation. Many more remained, but some were on the fence, wondering, can I still stay here? Is this still my beloved community? Well, no one can answer that question except for you. But what I have been saying since I arrived here at Unity Church is that you are a unique congregation in many ways, but you are not special. So let me tell you what I mean by that. You are unique in many ways, such as the creation of your double helix model and the intertwining of spiritual practices with our anti-racist, anti-oppression work. Your governance system, as implemented, is a form of institutional spiritual practice, the likes of which I have not seen in any other congregation. The quality of your community and the overall health of this congregation stands out for me in all of my experiences, now serving 8 congregations during my career. So I say this with great love and affection. You're unique, but you're not special. You're not special because you are not the first or will be the only congregation that has experienced conflict, disagreement, grief, or loss. I know you know this, because you have weathered other conflicts before. But I would be negligent in my job as your interim minister if I didn't help you see the bigger picture, the one that I see that will help illuminate your path forward. What are we now? Someone said, after the search ended without a call. That was the question that was hanging in the air as we began the new church year this past fall. And in response, the Board of Trustees and I hosted another conversation on November 5th called Forward Together, Next Steps. And I reminded you of the 5 developmental tasks of interim ministry with the additional focus on healing the hurt that was caused by the congregational meeting and the subsequent inability to call a candidate. And as a result of that gathering, the board collected, read, and collated comments from everyone who wanted to communicate their thoughts, cares, and concerns, both in person and online. And again, I am highlighting the comments that appeared more than once. One person wrote, quote, "The conflict is still a mystery, which I hope to know more about." And another, "I am still mystified about what happened." Others were generally more positive comments from the conversation we had in November, such as, quote, "I greatly appreciate the Board of Trustees learning what went wrong and being brave enough to face it, name it, and propose a plan to move on from it." quote, "I am happy to hear about important questions being asked and many working on creating a path forward. This was an example of good transparency," said another. And finally, "It's not what happened, but how you react to what happened that is most important." Isn't that statement true for our own lives? Life happens to all of us. We don't have a choice about that. We do have a choice about how we react. Do we react in anger, assuming ill intent? Do we withdraw, hurt and alone, keep hoping someone will reach out to us? Do we barrel on forward, insisting on the rightness of our position? I suspect we do all of these things and more. But what's different, maybe unique, is about how we move forward together from a traumatic experience within a religious and spiritual community based on what we've learned here and who we have met here, that we can have the confidence that there are ways to respond from a place of embodied spiritual practice. Many years ago, I heard a spiritual teacher tell me about how they framed their spiritual life, and I use this myself, and perhaps you've heard something similar from this pulpit in the past. A spiritual life, he said, consists of daily practice, weekly worship, monthly service, annual retreat, and lifetime pilgrimage. And I would add, weaving in and among and beyond those 5 parts is an ongoing commitment to decentering whiteness and continuing to work on becoming an anti-racist, anti-oppressive world. And I must tell you that as I have done a deep dive into Unity's history and identity, I see all 6 of these in your congregational life, going all the way back, in fact, to Roy Phillips, who spoke and wrote about creating intentional spiritual communities, although he was less interested in the ways our commitment to social action and justice intersect with our spiritual lives. And Reverend Rob and Jan Eller Isaac's ministry made spiritual practice part of their teachings, and I see the embodiment of that in so many aspects of Unity's life, from the intimacy of the chalice circles to the ways in which you show up for worship and deeply appreciate the rites and the rituals that make up our shared practice of worshiping together. Many of our congregations talk about spirituality, although there are still some that are hesitant to even use that language. But there are few that I've encountered that have, I think, as rich and deep an understanding of what a community of spiritual practice in a faith tradition looks and feels like. It is a disciplined practice of challenging our own self-centeredness and ego. It's the practice of generosity, both in terms of financially giving to the church and in offering hospitality to one another, to visitors, to guests. It is offering weekly opportunities for practice, whether that is sitting in zazen or listening and reflection in the chalice circles, or teaching in religious education, or serving as a coming-of-age mentor. Unity is by no means the only UU community or liberal church that offers these kinds of opportunities. And it isn't just the length of the list of programs and practices that you see on the church calendar that makes a community of spiritual practice. It is the quality of being present with and for one another that makes the difference. Unity Church has worked on this quality of being present to one another for a long time across many ministries. So I expect some of you will come away from this sermon today asking, well, if we're such a spiritual community, why did the vote on May 22nd turn out the way it did? Not only with the inability to call a new minister, but with the surprise and the hurt that we felt by the different opinions and feelings that surrounded us afterwards. What could we have done differently? Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing that's the hardest for confident, capable, and yes, mostly white and privileged human beings to wrap our minds around. There are some things beyond our control. Despite watching every step we take, we still fall on the ice. Despite making plans in advance, our flights are canceled. Despite wearing a mask everywhere, we still get COVID. Despite all the energy and effort put forth, the perfect storm landed at Unity Church's doorstep, and we, you, I, Reverend Karen, Reverend KP, Barbara Hubbard, and the staff are all still sorting out what was left behind in its wake. Where did we come from? Well, that's one of the questions from this morning's round, and one of the questions that we looked at on February 3rd and 4th when Reverend Karen Gustafson and I led 2 sessions about important milestone events in the history of this congregation and in your relationship to its history. And those of you who are brand new, you're encouraged to participate as well. You were, because you're now part of Unity's history. So we created a timeline, and those in attendance were asked to jot down memorable moments in your relationship to Unity Church. And then we put up Post-it notes in 6 areas of worship, religious education, faith development, spiritual practice, shared ministry, rites of passage, social justice. And those Post-it notes formed a tapestry of faithful witness to the power of religious community. I was interested to note how many times, what came up over and over again from the Post-it notes. Just a couple highlights. Jan Eller Isaac's sermons came up many times, but particularly her Me Too sermon and the Weeping Bowl. And Rob's sermons, particularly around Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, were important. And of course, music, mentioned over and over again. The powerful ministry of music of Ruth Palmer and now Ahmad and Andalzuaz, and the ways in which music in this congregation is experienced as a deep spiritual practice. I was surprised to discover how many comments there were about the ministry of Reverend Gretchen Thompson. Whether her sermons or her ministry of presence and pastoral care, though her ministry here was brief, she left a deep impression on members who knew her. And during the life review, Reverend Karen and I also looked for stories that weren't told. And it's understandable that many of the Post-it notes would be about the last 21 years of Rob and Jan's ministry. But I was surprised to note that Reverend Roy Phillips, who served Unity for 28 years, was only mentioned twice. One Post-it note said, "Roy dedicated my daughter in 1977. And the other Post-it note said this, "What's missing? Details and stories about Reverend Roy Phillips' various forms of abuse of congregants, staff, and board members. The extramarital affairs started as early as 1975. The really hurtful stuff is too hard to reveal." End quote. The ending of Roy Phillips' ministry was known to members who served on the board at the time. But it's likely that most members had not experienced that side of Roy's behavior. Roy's extramarital affairs were suspected by a small group of leaders, but it wasn't until 2006, when he was invited back to preach at Unity Church, that the depth of his misconduct was revealed. And that event prompted some members of Unity Church to tell Reverends Rob and Jan firmly, "No, we do not want him back in our pulpit." And Rob and Jan rescinded the offer and then brought in a professional church consultant on clergy misconduct to address the wounds created by his behavior. What we know about dealing with abuse in our own personal lives or misconduct in a congregation is that people and congregations can and do heal from those wounds, but it takes time and it takes work. And sometimes, after memory fades into the background, it can be reactivated by stress. And this congregation has had a fair amount of stress since 2020. And this is one of the reasons why Reverend Karen Gustafson is offering a series of opportunities to tell stories about Unity Church. One of them's happening after today's service in the Robbins Parlor, noon to 2. Or on Wednesday, March 15th and 22nd at 7 p.m. in the Gannett Room as part of a Wellspring program. Some stories bear repeating and examination and reflection and to be held in the sacred space of community. So the purpose of our Congregational Life review was to identify and name the intersections in the world, in Minnesota, in St. Paul, in Unity Church, and your life. And your history is filled with glorious successes and grave mistakes, of some spectacular ministries and some that were just great surging moments of solidarity in times of individuals feeling isolated and uncertain about the church. Post-it note after post-it note. Oh, it was so beautiful, of your children, memories of your children being dedicated, as we just did. But perhaps the most poignant and touching stories are the ones where brokenness was healed and hope was found, such as, quote, end of marriage, being held here, remarried here to a new partner, or I was broken and then I was blessed. Tolling of the bells reminded me of the fragility of life. Someone wrote, Leon Dunkley reminding us, you are already loved. And in 1981, quote, quit smoking, join church, never look back. And these notes don't even count for the many experiences of bearing witness to justice, whether riding the bus to Women's March in Washington, D.C., or the Love Bus to marry same-sex couples, or the Selma 70, the Faith Float on Rondo Days Parade, the many trips to New Orleans after Katrina, or the partnerships created by pilgrimages to Transylvania, India, Bolivia. The list goes on. And this is the way we build a life. A love and a community of faith that withstands hard times. It's one of the ways we build capacity to enlarge our faithful response to a chaotic world. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? So these past 6 months, I've explored your history to understand what formed your bones. I've looked at your identity, not through just a single lens, but more like I just discovered this word, phoropter. That's the name of that machine the optometrist uses while checking your eyes and keeps flipping. Phoropter, isn't that cool? Is it clearer now or now? Is this better or worse? Better, worse. Sometimes it's hard to know, right? So you make an educated guess. And sometimes the decision is so close that it doesn't really matter. So what does matter is how you interpret your mission and your ministry that leads you towards the ends. And that's why I used your end statements or values in action as this morning's responsive reading to remind us that these are the promises we make ourselves to one another and to the holy. They point to the heart of all we do. We strive to live lives of meaning and purpose through acts of integrity, service, and joy. And in the middle of Unity's mission, we find the word service. And it's not only this month's theme, but it is the binding agent of this and all sacred communities. This means that we serve one another when we engage in holy conversations, when we don't avoid hard truths, but we embrace them with curiosity not condemnation. The middle of our mission is service. And the poet Naomi Shihab Nye spells out the middle of our mission very clearly when she reminds us of what it takes to live in this world. She reminds us that we should all be wearing jackets that say fragile and handle with care, because we often so forget we are all sensitive cargo. We must draw close enough to hear one another's breathing. We must know that if you are too weary to carry your child, I will. We will. Because we are not going to be able to live in this world if we're not willing to do what that man was doing for the boy, what we are willing to do with and for one another. Service. Even when our hearts and our arms ache, service, knowing that the rain will fall and we will get wet and we must cross a dangerous road, knowing that the road will only be wide and the rain will never stop falling. Unity Church, I believe in you. I believe in your ability to launch another search process. I believe in your capacity to handle conflict constructively, grounded in your spiritual practice. I believe in your ability to deepen as faith partners in this journey, which has now lasted over 150 years. I believe this because I also believe we have no other choice but to love one another and serve one another, because we are all we're just walking each other home. May it be so. And amen.
Ooh, it's a little dusty in here. Former minister Reverend Arthur Foote once wrote, "Freely have we received of gifts that minister to our needs of body and spirit. Gladly we bring to our church and its wide concerns a portion of this bounty." Today, the larger portion of our offering will be shared with Citadel Food Bank in St. Paul, a community resource providing boxes of food for up to 350 families each week. Unexpected shortfalls in their 2022 holiday donations have left the food bank scrambling for funds to meet the needs of its clients, and this offering will help support the purchase of non-perishable food and home care products. Will the ushers please come forward? Please give as generously as you can today. We dedicate these offerings and ourselves to the greater work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love we call community.
Oh, greetings, friends. It has been so good to be here with you this morning as we begin Women's History Month, and also as millions around the world celebrate this Wednesday Holi, which is the Hindu festival of spring. I want to extend a special welcome to our visitors and guests, and especially those watching us online this morning. There are many ways for you to become connected to the plenty of opportunities that connect with your values, others who share them, to grow in heart and mind, and to serve others. So I want to tell you about a few of those opportunities and a few sort of logistical announcements. First, Worship Associate Merrill and I will be glad to greet you in the foyer after today's service. But we also encourage you to stop by the center room for 2 milestone celebrations. First, to welcome our families whose children were just dedicated this morning, and also to celebrate the work of our staff member, Ray Homemeyer, who is leaving their position as Coordinator of Family and Children's Ministries after today. Ray has been a consistent and caring presence for our children and their families, and we wish Ray the very best as they enter into another chapter of their life. And do stop by the parish hall also for coffee, conversation, and to visit the tables which are in the parish hall. Couple things I wanted to draw to your attention. The affordable housing team is inviting you to drop off any spare keys that you'd like to get rid of. If you don't have any, no problem. Drop by their table and sign a tag that will be fastened to the keys they've already collected. This is part of something called an Unlock the Metro campaign, and a description of what this campaign's about can be found in your This Week at Unity. You can also purchase tickets today for the 34th Annual Youth Musical, which opens this Thursday. And we invite you to mark your calendars for the second Gender and Faith Retreat held on Saturday, March 18th here at Unity. In honor of past women, men's, and queer retreats, all genders are encouraged to participate and continue to explore our interim questions, such as what kind of retreats deepen our spiritual practices and faith journeys, and when and how do we want to offer gendered spaces at Unity, and how can we expand our capacity for meaningful dialogue across gendered experiences. These are some of the questions we'll be exploring. Please talk to Laura Park or Ray Homemeyer for more information. And just 2 other quick things. Finding Yourself at Unity will be held 10:15 upstairs in the Gannett Room with Reverend Karen, talking about the Congregational Ministry of Care. And a correction, the conversation with Karen will be held at 12:30, the one I referenced in the sermon, not at noon. And finally, I'd like to invite our board president, Louise Livesay, to come forward to the reading desk with a special announcement from the Board of Trustees.
Good morning, everyone. Before I get into business, I have to say, I'm donning the wonderful shawl that I received at the auction last night. I had to wear this because it is so beautiful, and there were many wonderful things given at the auction.
Outbid me on it.
That's not why I wore it, but anyway. The search for Unity's next settled senior minister is underway. Well, the process of getting into the search, and it's time to select our next ministerial search team. This volunteer team of 7 members this year will be responsible for finding our next called minister. Tasks include gathering congregational input, remaining connected to the Board of Trustees and executive team, and maintaining communication with the congregation through the process, working closely with a representative from the UUA, reviewing and editing the 2022 congregational record, creating a ministerial packet, visiting, interviewing, discerning a candidate selection, and advancing the final candidate to the congregation for its review and call. The final candidate will be brought before the congregation for a vote next spring of 2024. Being a member of this team involves a substantial time commitment of approximately 1 year, beginning in June of this year, which includes meetings 3 to 5 times a month, off-site retreat in the summer of 2023, short distance travel to observe potential candidates, preparation for candidating week, preparation of final report to the Board of Trustees upon completion of the search, managing the search budget, and probably many other details. But our first step is gathering nominations. We are inviting you to nominate a voting member, either yourself or a fellow churchgoer, to participate in this important work. So here's how it works. There is a link on Unity's homepage where you can submit the name of who you wish to nominate to this important team. Everyone is welcome to provide nominations. When you do so, clicking on the link on the web page, please include your name, the nominee's name, and a brief statement why you think this person would be a good candidate for the MST. Nominations close on March 12th, so this is open for 1 week at the end of the day. We need to move at quick speed this spring. All nominees who are voting members will be asked if they are interested in applying and receive the application. Voting members can also self-nominate and apply online. Thank you.
All right. Well, that seems like a great lead into our closing hymn, The Fire of Commitment. Let's rise, embody our spirit. The future begins now. Now is the future. When we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. For all who see God, may God go with you. For all who seek to embrace life, may life return your affection. And for all who seek a better way, may the path be found and the courage to take it step by step. May it be so. And go in peace.